First of all, just another really, really warm welcome, Alastair Campbell. Why winners, why now?
This is my 11th book since I left Downing Street. Wow. And I've tended recently to go fiction, non-fiction, fiction, non-fiction. So I'm on my non-fiction kick at the moment. I think partly it's because I feel Britain's slightly losing its way at the moment, and that actually that losing negative mindset that you alluded to is getting a hold, and I think it's very, very dangerous, and we've got to be a bit careful. I was incredibly lucky about people that I met and spoke to or that I've worked with. I did an interview with Kevin Spacey recently for GQ magazine, and actually he's in the book about innovation because of House of Cards and Netflix, which is an amazing innovation which is changing the way we consume entertainment. But he said this thing, that he said that, you know, for me, the worst word in the English language is content, because content means everything's fine. Well, if everything's not fine, it means you've got to try and change it. And I think what you're talking about in this book are people who have decided to do big things, and then they've worked out what they need to do to win at those big things, and they've gone and done it. And I think you can learn from those people. I think you can also learn from the people who failed, obviously.
Of course.
And of course, and sometimes it's the same people. They fail, but then they won.
So what struck me, I got the book and I'm thumbing through it, it's the broadest of broadest churches. Mm-hmm. How did you choose who to go to?
Funny enough, we'd sat down right at the start and actually wrote down the people we thought would be best to speak to strategy, to innovation, to data, whatever it might be, and then go and ask them. And I'd say we had about a 70% hit rate.
Wow.
Which was good.
Which ones really stand out just for you and why, out of all the people that you interviewed?
I suppose the ones that are most interesting for me are the ones who turned out not to be what I was expecting. So, for example, I thought that Anna Wintour, editor of American Vogue, sort of icon in the fashion industry, in my plan, in my head, she was going to be an innovator, because fashion's all about the new and innovation. But actually, she's become my main profile on leadership, because I think she's very interesting in how she has come to sort of lead an industry. So she was interesting. Mourinho was fascinating, partly, and I know you're a Chelsea supporter and you're still recovering from the fact that you failed to beat Burnley at the weekend. He was interesting because he wasn't what I expected. I've met him a couple of times, but I've only met him briefly and usually with somebody else. But actually sitting down and talking to him, I got a real sense of, and here's a quality that, again, people don't necessarily like, but Clive Woodward, English rugby coach, I said to him, what is your single best quality? And he said, I'm an obsessive. And he said, a lot of people that think that's a bad thing, and they think it's about getting up in the middle of the night and sending emails to show you're still working at 3 a.m. It's not about that. It's about being obsessed about what you need to do to give yourself the best possible chance of meeting the objectives that you set for yourself. Mourinho is an obsessive.
Yes.
You can tell that. And but the other thing I found about him is that he really thinks about stuff. Now, that may sound obvious, but what comes over when you see him on television and doing interviews and what have you is just kind of, you know, it's just part of his job. It's not an important part of his job for him. The important part is doing what he has to do to get the team set up to win and the club set up to win. So he was interesting because of the argument we had about what strategy is. The one that I found the most sort of mind-blowing was actually a woman that I suspect most people here won't have heard of, the Australians amongst you will, but a woman called Lane Beachley, who's a surfer, who had just the most extraordinary life and the most extraordinary childhood, absolute misery memoir from start to finish, and wrote in her journal, age 10, I am going to be a world champion at something, it's the only way I can deal with this. 7 times world champion surfer, never enjoyed it until the very, very end. I've actually written a chapter about her and Nelson Mandela together as symbols of resilience. And that's the other thing that I've found interesting in doing it, is looking at these qualities and characteristics. I've got Branson, who is in the film, on boldness. But actually, he's bold in business. And what was fascinating about him is that every single business every business venture he's gone into, it's really born of personal frustration. So he loved music, he loved records, and he thought, why is it so boring when you go into a record store? Why can't we have interesting record stores where it's fun and it's funky and people feel it's a nice place to hang out? He created Virgin Records. Why is flying so crap? It was one of his kind of, why is it so crap? What is such a bad experience when you fly? He set up Virgin Airlines. He had a vision of what that should be.
So if our students here, mainly postgraduate students here, starting to think about career next steps, were there any learning you took, any common themes? And it's next to impossible to think out of all the people you saw, but common themes, building blocks that you think were platforms that, like, who said, your surfer who says, I'm going to be a world champion. Were there any common building blocks that you could share with our students here?
I think you could always find, there are hundreds of people in the book, and there's maybe a few dozen that we spoke to in kind of real depth. But I would say, in no particular order, some of them are going to sound so obvious, but they're still worth saying. They work really, really hard. They work harder than their rivals, they work harder than their competitors. They are restless. They don't think they've ever achieved everything that they set out to achieve. They want to go for the next thing and the next thing. They are resilient, I think. Most of them, Floyd Mayweather, the boxer, is the only one who's never known what it's like to lose. Everybody else, and also he's the only one who said, I never ever think about losing. And he's about to have his 48th professional fight, and it's going to be the richest sporting event of all time.
Yes.
He is the richest athlete in the world already, and that's what he wanted to be. Shane Warne, the cricketer, he said this thing about the 3 most important words in the language are never give up. Shane Warne wanted to be an Aussie rules footballer, and he actually was a very good Aussie rules player, but he wasn't quite good enough. But he didn't want to, he was working in a pizza shop, and he was doing all these different part-time jobs, and he just didn't want to do it. He came to England, he was a good cricketer, but not great. He came to England, he joined a cricket club, he became obsessed with cricket, obsessed with winning at cricket. That's what he did. One thing that I think is really important is this thing about definition. Saying to yourself, right, this is what I want to do, but then knowing what the steps are that you're going to have to take to do that and thinking those through for yourself. And Wasim Akram, who's a Pakistani fast bowler.
Cricketer.
Yeah, he said something I thought was really insightful but obvious. He said, there's a massive difference between wanting to win and will to win. Everybody wants to win, but have you got the will to win, which means do you know what the steps are that you need to take to win, and are you prepared to think those through and then do them? So I think having a sense of your own strategy, being able to build teams, being able to motivate other people, being able to cope, not just cope with setback, but turn setback to your advantage and learn from it.
It's beginning to sound that anyone who applies, plans, resilient, strives, can become a winner.
Well, they might not want to be by my definition, but I do think that anybody can learn more than they already know. I think one of the really interesting things about somebody like Dave Brailsford, who ran British Cycling, now is in charge of Team Sky, he set himself the objective of having a British winner of the Tour de France, the greatest cycling event in the world, within 5 years with a clean British rider. He did it ahead of time. And it's interesting what you were saying in your introductory remarks. A lot of these people say fear of defeat
drives them.
Is the driver. Actually, interesting, I said to him, which other world did you learn most from? And he said psychiatry. And I thought that was really interesting as well, because he actually said that the mindset, it was then about the mindset of the athletes.
There was a thread I got through the book, which was, they're close to, some of them are very close to the edge. And you do talk about psychologists, psychiatrists quite a bit.
Yeah.
Say a little bit more about that.
Well, I did an interview with the Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago, and the headline they ran on it was, Miliband needs a shrink, says Campbell. I didn't say that. What I did say...
Come on.
I didn't. No, I didn't say that. And in fact, I can tell you, because I just got the email this afternoon, they are clarifying.
Of course.
Publicly, the headline. But the thing is that what I did say was that I think it's really weird to me that sport, which is predominantly physical,
yes,
is now a given that these top sports people have proper professional psychological support. Business and politics, which are primarily intellectual, mental work, it's like, oh no, you can't go there. You can't go there because people will think you're a bit odd. And I think that's weird. And actually, so what I said was I think 100% of top political leaders and top politicians, because it's an incredibly stressful world, it's an incredibly difficult job, the pressures are enormous, I said I think all of them could benefit from proper professional psychological support, which they can decide what it is. But anyway, Miliband needs a shrink, says Campbell. But the point is that I believe that. So when we talked earlier about what can all these different worlds learn from each other, I think politics and business can learn from the fact that these winners in sport, they understand that the mental and the physical go together all the time.
70% of the people you chose responded positively.
About that, yeah.
And most of them, from my reading of it, you took something positive away, something clear and something positive.
Yeah, definitely.
Were there any of those situations which you were a little disappointed?
No, generally I was. I mean, look, somebody said to me last night, why don't you write a book about losers? And which is a good idea, right? But it's easier to go to somebody and say, hey, Rennie, I'm writing this book about world-beating people and I only want to talk to the best of the best. Would you like to be in it? Okay? Right. Alternatively, As opposed to...
Do you know how rubbish you really are?
Rennie, I'm writing a book about losers and can I talk to you? Right? It's harder to get the people for that one. But what's interesting, though, is how many of them say that losing has been a big part of their success. So learning from defeat and learning how to deal with defeat. It's a big part of it.
So brings us nicely to a leader that we both know and probably admire in Tony Blair. Mm-hmm. He, for 3 elections on the trot, mm-hmm. but his brand and reputation, many would say, is now diminished. Mm-hmm. Give me a view on him.
Well,
as a winner.
Tony's on the cover. He is a winner in my view. He's not big on the cover because he's not as big in the book as some of the others, but he is a winner. And also, I mean, I do a lot of work with foreign leaders, and I actually get asked to go and advise parties around the world, and they want the New Labour playbook, as it were. Mm. But in Britain, partly, but not exclusively because of Iraq, but a lot of it to do with Iraq, he gets vilified in large parts of the media. And it saddens me, really. It's back to this point when we were talking about earlier about negativity, about building people up to knock them down and all the rest of it. Because I think Tony is still a winner. He's doing things in a different way now. All you hear about in the British media is he makes loads of money. Right, but he makes loads of money so as he can do things with it, like run some extraordinary projects in different parts of Africa where he's putting the money in himself. So I don't have any worry that Tony will be seen in a totally different light by history.
I read a piece in the FT recently that said that he just won't back down.
On?
Anything. If you were still advising him today, mm-hmm. would you say that, you know what, touch of humility, back down a bit?
On what, though?
Let's say Iraq.
But why? People say they want politicians to be authentic and to say what they think. Why do you want a politician, because you think he's not in as good a place as you'd like him to be, because I know you like him and admire him, why do you want them to say something that they don't believe? So authenticity is important. It's crucial, and even if it costs you. And the thing is, I think too many people in politics and business today, and in sport actually, too many of them confuse having a good press with having a good or bad reputation.
Very interesting.
I don't believe that having a good press equates to having a good reputation. I think a lot of people who get a lot of bad press have a bad reputation. Here's a really interesting question. I say in the book, Rupert Murdoch is an incredibly successful and powerful businessman. Does he have a good reputation? I don't think so. And he's got control over more media, print and air, than anybody else. But I think he's lost control of his reputation. I look at somebody like Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton endured his own fault, getting up to stuff that he shouldn't have got up to, and all the rest of it. He had a lot of bad press whilst he was President of the United States. He's got a great reputation around the world. We're talking about football, and I mean, Arsene Wenger, he's on the book, on the cover of the book. Now, he hasn't won much recently, but I still think he's a winner. I think actually the fact that he had that season where Arsenal went unbeaten, the so-called Invincibles, that kind of gives him that label anyway, I think. But he said something fascinating, which I just think is a really clever insight. He said that we've gone from a vertical world to a horizontal world.
Yes.
Vertical, leaders lead, people follow, the decisions percolate down. Horizontal world, social media, 24 News, yes. Everybody's got an opinion. You're surrounded by noise all of the time.
Great point.
Right? The only way to deal with that is actually, yes, you listen, but you've got to ignore the noise. You've got to separate out the noise from what's important. And too many people, I think, in business and in politics, in any walks of life, they think the noise is what should decide their strategy. But they should decide their strategy and then listen to the noise, but don't let the noise drive.
Don't be governed by it.
Yeah.
So early on, you said something about one of the things that inspired you to do the book was perhaps we're getting a little cynical negative around us in the UK. Were there any sort of insights into UK, Europe, America, emerging markets? Do we have a different approach to winners? Do we breed more? Do we tolerate more? Do we create the conditions for success?
Well, I mentioned Lane Beachley in Australia. I've written a chapter about Australia. Mm-hmm. I do think Australia, 25 million, 22.5 million, whatever it is, they produce a lot of winning people, especially in sport, but not just in sport. And I think that actually stems from where they came from as a country, from the struggle in the start, from the fact that they were made to feel like second-class citizens, particularly by the British. And they fought back against that, and they still do. And I think that gives them this kind of winning drive. I think we Britain, I think culturally we become very negative. I think there's a sense almost that we prefer losing to winning. I haven't put this in the book, but Peter Schmeichel, the former Manchester United goalkeeper, I played in a charity match with him and spent a week with these players, and he said something really interesting. He said, you know, England will never win another tournament while you've got the media you've got.
Wow.
I said, what do you mean? He said, well, when I'm playing with Manchester United, he said, we've got a mindset that if we concede a goal, we just say, right, we've got to score 2. He said, the English players on this team, when they're playing for England, when they concede a goal, they think, we are going to get crucified tomorrow. And that's a really interesting, I thought it was a fascinating observation. And that's why a lot of these managers like Ferguson, like Mourinho and the rest of them, they've gone out and they deliberately try to cow the media and get the media where they want them, not the other way around, because they know that if you lose that battle, if you let them get inside the minds of your players more than you're inside the minds of your players, they're not going to perform for you.
Jack Straw, Malcolm Rifkind, 2 grandees, glittering careers, up in smoke.
Well, they were the victims of the sting. But I think that, just going back to the point about Clinton and resilience, I mean, I always point to Clinton when I say, you say ignominy. Well, it's not a great way to end a career, I'll give you that.
All, yes.
But then you have to think about, okay, I've made a mistake, I've been punished, I've paid a price for it, now what do I do? Now where do I go? I don't think they should kind of hide away for the rest of their lives.
Many would say easier to do in America than it is in the UK.
I think that's probably true. But then one of the people I write about in the book is David Beckham. People look at David Beckham now and think, wow, you know, David Beckham and he's glamorous and he's this and he's the #1 A-list celeb and blah, blah, blah. There was a time when David Beckham was getting dog dirt through the post, back to Peter Schmeichel's point, because he got sent off against Argentina and England got knocked out of the World Cup.
And we're going to crucify him.
And there were effigies hanging from lampposts. How did he deal with that? He just went to the core of what he is as a human being, which is quite a nice bloke and a very good footballer. And he focused on that, and he got back. And stroke of luck, in a way, the new Wembley was being built, so the England games at the time were in Manchester, some of them. He scored that amazing goal against Greece, was it?
Yes,
that got England qualification. So people do love that sort of sense of a comeback story.
Very good point. A few weeks ago, we had a really well-attended event here about extraordinary times demands extraordinary women. We had some business leaders who are women who are fantastic. Mm-hmm. You looked at some men, you looked at some women. Did you see any difference in their approach to winning or how they went about it? Anything that sort of stood out?
This is really interesting. This question has been asked. I've done 4 events now in the last 24 hours in this book. It's been asked at every single one.
Well, let's forget it then and go to
don't, because at the last one I admitted that at the talk I did last night, it was my worst answer. And
well, please.
No, I still haven't got the answer right. So I'm going to give you my fourth version now, because first thing to say is some of the biggest winners in the book are women. Mm-hmm. Angela Merkel is my most admired current politician. The Queen we mentioned, Anna Wintour we mentioned, Arianna Huffington's in there as a great innovator. Yeah. She has completely changed the media landscape, single-handedly. I think the answer is that it's not about their gender. Doesn't mean that women don't have to deal with more to deal with the sort of pressures of...
So what are we doing in a slightly different way? Forget what you think, take the logic out of it. Did it feel different?
No.
Not at all?
No.
Speaking to Angela Merkel, how did it feel speaking to her? She gets a mixed press.
I think she gets a very good press. I think she gets a very good press, and I think she deserves it.
I've not seen anyone say that she inspires.
No, but that's what's fascinating about her. I mean, here's something that people find extraordinary. Angela Merkel has a very, very, very small, tight entourage that she goes everywhere with, including actually another woman. Her most powerful right-hand man, in quotes, is another woman whose name very few people know, Beate Baumann. And she's got a press guy she goes with, 2 or 3 others. She also has a personal stylist who travels everywhere with her.
A daring comment.
Right, okay.
A daring comment.
Wait a minute. But this is really, really interesting. This is really interesting about her. She travels with a stylist whose brief is to make sure nobody talks about the way she looks. She doesn't want features written about her clothes. She doesn't want people to say, has she changed her hairdo? So the stylist's job is to make sure she looks the same. Because part of her message is steadfast, serious,
very good,
solid.
Very good.
Okay? Yes. And I think it is harder for a woman in politics. We've got a very good friend who's the Prime Minister of Denmark. Okay? And she got called Gucci Hella because she always looks great. Okay? Why shouldn't she? She takes time and care, and that's what she wants to do. But women do get judged and written about in completely different ways to men. Merkel has thought through how to deal with that.
So this whole exercise of winners that you've gone through and now complete, and it's really is a must-read book from where I sit. Has it changed you? Do you look at things a little differently?
I look at some things a bit differently. No, it probably hasn't changed me because, I mean, Fiona, who's my long-suffering partner of 35 years, who actually thinks that I'm slightly mad, and in fact quite very mad really, but this winning thing, that I'm too obsessive about it, I think it's solidified me in views that I already had, but it's made me think differently about things at the margins.
Give an example.
Mourinho on strategy. I've been thinking about that a lot because he has a different view of what strategy is.
And it was totally different to what I understood strategy to be when I read it.
Yeah, so that made me think differently. I think this whole business about resilience. Now, I'll tell you where I really have thought about things in a different way is data. I've never understood Formula One. I've never understood its appeal. I've never understood why people get so excited about it. I've never really understood, to be honest, why it's on the telly. I think it's just, I think it's really boring. But having gone and spent time with the guys who do it, I think it's incredible what they do.
Yes.
Because it's the use of data to drive progress and the mindset of the people in it. We spent a bit of time with this guy, Paddy Lowe, who runs the Mercedes team. Yes. Unbelievable guy. I mean, actually, if he walked in here now, you wouldn't give him a second look. He doesn't look terribly charismatic. He just he's little and all that stuff. But he says there's a culture in Formula One, which is, we're on it. We're on it. He says there's no greater feeling than somebody coming in and saying, got this idea for a tiny innovation. We've worked out, if we do everything really, really well, it might take 0.02 seconds off the lap time. Now, when they're doing that, these guys, and the technology around it is incredible. I mean, this wind tunnel with what I describe as what must be the fastest treadmill in the world, where they're testing on a treadmill with the car, and they can simulate every track around the world and every bend and it's just like, God, this takes data and innovation to a level that I thought we were quite good in New Labour. We weren't even at the races.
So before I open the floor to questions, final thoughts. think about when you was at roughly the stage of our students here, where academia was prominent, unemployment was sort of slightly different. What advice would you be giving them, given your experience and learnings from winners, that enables the career choice and progression through the career? What are sort of things you pick up?
Okay. Well, the first thing I'd say is that when I was your age. But I'll tell you what I would say is, if you'd have said to me then that you will work for a person who will become a figure in history, who will win 3 general elections and do all sorts of things, and you'll be part of that, I would have said you're completely insane. That is not going to happen. If you'd have said that I would have spent time in the company of Nelson Mandela and been part of the process that followed him trying to build a democratic, truly democratic South Africa, I'd have said, you're completely insane. So I would say, whatever it is that you think you can do, you can probably do even more. But I do think that what the whole kind of new technology stuff has done is it's given anybody who's clever and who's got an idea, they can do stuff with that.
Fabulous.
You know, so I think have ideas and do stuff.
Very good. QuinnyStar27, this is the Twitter handle. Do you believe chance has a big part to play for winners?
Totally. I mean, it's not the only thing, but look, luck is... I'm trying to think of an example. Here's a really good example, Richard Branson, okay? I asked him who came up with the name Virgin. I think Virgin, for his brand, is brilliant. And he's shown that, right? And I was amazed at this. He said, I can't remember. He said, it was when we were starting out and we were doing the record stores and we were having a meeting and there was a girl there and she said, why don't we say Virgin? Why don't we call ourselves Virgin? Because we're all virgins at business. And everybody said, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll do that. And I've completely forgotten who she is. It's harsh, isn't it? I think I'll tell you here, if there's somebody kind of who's got a sort of 60-year-old mum, or you should go out and say, I'm the person who came up with Virgin, because he has totally forgotten. And then when he first went into airlines, when he tested the first plane, there was one Financial Times... Now, Branson, there'd be 100 photographers there. There was one photographer, and he was from the Financial Times, and a bird flew into the engine on takeoff, and it didn't fly, right? And this photographer, this probably wouldn't happen today, but he said, I'm not that sort of photographer. I won't give him the picture. And I imagine if that had been the first story of Branson Airlines, first plane didn't even take off. Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, here's the funny. Do you know what Branson wanted to call it?
Go on.
His idea for his company was to call it was a record company, was to call it Slipped Disc.
Let's take another question, shall we?
My question is not about winners. It's about someone who's close to them, about their families, about their parents, children.
Yeah.
What is their role in winning?
So, I'll tell you...
Well, hang on.
Okay,
I'll come to you second.
Sorry.
Rory, where's Rory? Rory or Fiona? One of the two of you. Fiona.
I think Alistair needs to think more about the role that women have to contend with in terms of raising their families when it comes to success. And the answer to the question about women winners is, I think a lot of it is to do with the inequalities that exist between the genders at a much earlier stage in their lives.
Beautifully put. Beautifully put.
Would all the feminists in the room like to give her a large round? You know what? Two nights in a row, the most hostile questioning in an event has come from members of my own family.
I thought that was quite gentle.
But there's a really interesting bit in the book where I talk about Seb Coe, for example. Sebastian Coe, great runner, helped deliver the Olympics and all the rest of it. Lovely bloke. But he said that when he was in the zone for a race, he could literally walk past members of his family and he wouldn't see them. Brendan Foster, another athlete, he said the same. And I think that, you know, it is difficult, but I think for some of these people, I mentioned, you know, Dave Brailsford, the cycling guy. Last year he spent, I think it was 270 days of the year away. That's not normal. I think it's a trade-off, and I think it is a sacrifice that people have to make sometimes to win.
You take another question.
I saw Billy Bean in your vignette before you started, and he's transferred a career as a GM into, I think, a lot of directorships in financial companies and whatnot. Did he say if any of the skills he'd learned in one were transferable, or is everything innate or learnt?
He was one of the nicest people. I couldn't believe how nice he was. He's such a nice man. He's also got a soft spot for Burnley, and he watches our games in the Premier League. So he's a loser. So I like him a lot. I think the answer to the question is yes, and I think he was one of the first to realise that what he was doing with the baseball team and with the people that he brought in. He was very interesting, for example, he said that some of the data geeks that he brought in, they didn't really know that much about baseball, they knew about data. And he said that at the start, if he'd have just brought them in and said to these baseball guys, right, these guys are going to tell you what to do, it wouldn't have worked. But he had the background in baseball, and therefore he could take what they were telling him and he could make it work. But now he has a situation where actually, because they've been successful, it's accepted that he can bring these people in and they are respected. What he took to other worlds is to say that data is only useful if it has predictive utility. Thank you, Rory. And that is really interesting actually in relation to politics. I've written about the Obama campaign, about how they use data. And too many people in politics look at data to find the things they want to see and want to hear. Whereas actually you've got to strip out and you've got to find what it actually says and then try and apply it.
Got a question up there before I come down here?
A short one.
Please.
Can you just say 2 words about the fear of winning?
The fear of winning?
The fear of winning.
Yes, because you talk about the fear of defeat, but there is a real fear of winning, and sometimes it's stopping a lot of projects. And
yeah. I think that's. I think there are. I think some people do prefer not winning. Actually, don't want to do the things and do want to live in a comfort zone. I think it's fine, but it's not fine if you're trying to win an election or you're trying to win a Premier League title.
Can everyone be a winner, Alistair?
Well, everyone can decide their own definition of winning. But with winners, I think there do have to be losers.
My question is, how do you approach your business? Because I think you see a lot of brilliance everywhere you walk, but the main point, so you are writing about what makes the people special, so how you are approaching
So
that.
what I'm hearing there is that you've analysed loads of people, you've understood what their formula for success is. What's your formula for success?
I think the single most important thing is to be very, very clear about what you are trying to achieve. And then to be very, very hard-headed about how you build a strategy for that. So I'll give you an example. One of the things I'm involved in at the moment is a campaign in the UK called Time to Change, which is about trying to change the way that people think about mental health and mental illness. Now, it's very hard to say, okay, what does a win feel like in that? Okay? When are you going to be able to say, we have won the campaign to change people's attitudes towards mental health and mental illness? But in my mind, I actually do have a sense of what that's going to feel like. And I feel that what I've learned from talking to these people, this is going to sound a little bit arrogant because I've always felt this thing about objective and strategy is the single most important thing in an organisation. And I feel that even though they have different definitions and different ways of describing it, that's what you have to have. You have to be really hard-headed. And you have to have arguments with yourself about saying, and this is another thing that probably drives Fiona a bit mad, but I have arguments going on in my head the whole time. Some of them I never resolve. But try to be hard-headed about working out what are you really trying to do and how are you going to do that. So in something like a campaign, what I take from these people, I take a little bit of all of them. Resilience is really important. Something like a campaign to change the way people think about something as ingrained as the mentally ill, that's going to take years, but it will change. And you talked earlier about what you say to people starting out. I mean, if I look at people here of you know in their 20s, say, it's probably impossible for you to imagine what it was like living in Britain. Rennie and I were talking about this earlier, when you would go to football matches and black footballers routinely would be the victim of abuse by thousands of people. How did that change? It changed because people made it change over time. So what was the objective? Racial equality. What was the strategy? Well, there were lots of people had different strategies, but ultimately it was about campaigning and deciding to make change. So what I take to it from, I mean, I don't really have a business, I just do different things, but whenever I do anything, even like something like coming tonight, I've thought through what's an objective, what's a strategy, how I'm going to do that. So that's what I take.
There's a question over here, please.
You have a book now about winners, and so as a writer, I wanted to ask you, have you disconnected from writing when you were publishing All in Your Mind, All in the Mind, or could this apply to Martin Sturrock? How would you put this book into that sort of mental state?
Oh my God. I imagine that not all of you will have read my novels, but the first one, which this lady has clearly read, is called All in the Mind, and it's about a psychiatrist who has problems, emerges even greater than his patients.
It's a great question.
Because I think actually it probably shows that however good René thinks this book is, it's not multi-dimensional. In other words, you couldn't necessarily apply it to everyone. I wouldn't go to Martin Sturrock, the psychiatrist, and say, "Here's sunshine, you need a bit of this." Because ultimately, I think when somebody's ill, they need medical treatment.
Something different.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you a relatively UK-based question about the northern powerhouses. Do you think there are enough great leaders to make the northern powerhouse actually work?
The northern... I think that the idea of the northern economic powerhouse is a tactic of the current government to portray themselves as being a party for the whole country rather than just the affluent parts of the south. In principle, I completely support the idea of regional devolution. I would have no truck whatever, ever, with Britain leaving the European Union. We shouldn't even be having a debate about it. And I would have regional assemblies, the House of Commons, the European Parliament, and get rid of the House of Lords completely. But that's quite radical. And it's not going to happen.
Just a bit.
It's not going to happen.
So basically my question is, you've spent a lot of time sort of behind the scenes as an advisor or a speechwriter. Now you're writing about other people who have done very well. Is it time to sort of throw your hat in the ring and run for an MP, potentially? Even Kensington with the Conservative...
I'm not going to get Kensington, am I? I do get asked that question. Unlike the Martin Sturrock question, I get that question a lot. And I'm actually going on from here to a Labour Party fundraiser, and I do get asked it a lot when I go to Labour Party fundraisers. I talk about struggles and arguments going on my head the whole time. One of them, I think all my life I've had a little bit of a struggle between self and service. I actually do, when I was kind of, as it were, allowing my whole being to be subsumed in a political project, I didn't have a problem with that. Both Fiona and I actually thought about it for this election. I was asked to stand in Burnley, which is the home
Northern
of,
powerhouse.
It's a northern footballing powerhouse at the moment. The thing is that I nearly did it before. And funny enough, when I transcribed my diaries, Tony Blair asked me to do it in 1997. He said you should get a seat. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous because I'm doing the campaign. And then 2001, I kind of was quite tempted. Lots of the others were doing it, David Miliband, Pat McFadden, and what have you. And then he said, I don't want you to do it. I'd rather you did the campaign. 2005, I was sick to the back teeth of the lot of it. I went back for the campaign, but I wanted to leave straight after. And instead I went off with Humphrey to New Zealand with the British and Irish Lions. And then 2010, I sort of thought about it, but Gordon Brown asked me to go and help him. And this time, and I think the truth is I've got in a place where I don't want to give up freedom. And that's very selfish, in a way, but it's kind of where I am.
I read the book, and I couldn't put it down. I honestly couldn't put it down. And the bit that inspired me most was there is no one sort of winner. Mm. It's the first thing that comes out to you when you read it. Every size, every shape, every race, gender, everything. There's something in there for everyone. But let's bring it back to tonight. Alistair's been authentic, he's been open, he's been self-deprecating, he's answered every single question fully. A true role model. Please, please join me giving Alistair a fantastic hand.
Thank you, Ray.